All right, so we're going to go over the two short FRQs. This is the 2018 exam. We did the long FRQ yesterday, so today is the two short FRQs. So here we have a pretty complex graph. The first question is asking you two potential sources of market failure exist. So just by looking at the graph, you'll notice two different things. One, you have a marginal private cost and a marginal social cost. So what that shows us is that there's a negative externality. All right, so that's going to be the first part of this question. There's a negative externality. All right, that's one of the sources of market failure. And the other source, you'll see you have a downward sloping demand and a downward sloping marginal revenue. That's telling us that this is a monopoly. So you would get a couple points for that if you identified both of those, plus a little explanation as to why you knew, how you knew there was a negative externality and a monopoly.
So we knew negative externality
Because there's a marginal private cost and a marginal social, so that space between. You knew it was a monopoly because you have your downward sloping demand and marginal revenue are separate. Where in perfect competition they would be together. The next part of it, use numerical values from the graph to identify profit maximizing quantity and price. So we're always grounding ourselves with MR equals MC, right? In this particular case, we're going to be working off the marginal private cost as our MC, right? Because that's where the firm would produce without any sort of government intervention. So where does MR hit that MPC is right here. So your quantity is going to be 150. Then you want to bring that up to the demand curve to get your price. So for B, it's going to be $35 and 150 as our quantity. So you would get another point for that. C, $15 per unit tax is imposed. Using numerical values from the graph, identify profit maximizing quantity and price with that $15 tax. All right, so what would happen with that $15 tax is your NPC curve is essentially going to be moving up, right? It would move up $15 to the MSC. So now the NPC is hitting your MR here. That's what really makes this graph kind of complicated, right? We haven't really looked at something like this before, so it's actually good that it came up as a practice. All right, so now your profit maximizing quantity is going to be here at 100, and you bring that up to the demand curve and 40. So this one's going to be $40 and 100 with the $15 tax. So it increases the price and it lowers the quantity. All right. The firm opposes the $15 per unit tax. They instead propose a policy of no government intervention, saying let's get rid of the tax. So would economic advisors agree to this? Would they support no government intervention? Would they support no government tax? And explain. All right. Well, the answer to this question is they would actually support it, right? So it says, would they support the policy of no government intervention? So your answer here would be yes. They would support that policy, right? Because economic advisors, they want to get to this socially optimal point where MSC equals MSB, right? So this is your socially optimal. Well, before the tax, that's where they were, right? The monopolist was already producing at that socially optimal point, and that was the price. So the tax actually throws the market off. It takes it away from the socially optimal point. So your answer to this question would be yes, they would support it because without the tax, the monopolist is producing at the socially optimal quantity. That's a tough graph to analyze just because we've looked at the MPC and the marginal social benefit before, the negative externality, but they throw in this extra marginal revenue curve, which makes it a monopoly, so that makes it a little bit more difficult. All right, so we're going to take a quick look at the second short FRQ we had. This one does entail drawing a graph. How are we doing with the video?
My arm hurts.
You get my good side or no?
Oh.
Doesn't exist. All right, assume milk is produced and sold in a perfectly competitive market. The government imposes an effective price floor. So they've given us that information, given us perfectly competitive. All right, so draw a correctly labeled graph. So A, supply, demand. You always want to identify your quantity and your price equilibrium. You want to make sure you're labeling your curves and your axes. So there's the start of the graph. Now we have to put on a price floor, an effective price floor. So remember, the price floor, you hit it before you get to equilibrium. So the price floor needs to be above, and you want to label it PF. They asked to label it PF. Now, once that price floor is instituted, because it is effective, it's going to change the quantity. Right? Now, your quantity demanded at that price is going to be right here. So that's all the producers are going to be able to sell, is only up to this point along that demand curve. So your new quantity is right there. We want to label that QF, quantity with the price floor. All right? So that would be the first graph you'd have to draw for A. So if you have all those elements there, you would get a point for that. Now it's saying, is the market for milk allocatively efficient after the price floor is imposed? All right, and the answer is no, because producers have a surplus. All right, they have leftover goods that aren't being bought. Right? At that price, producers are going to want to sell way over here on the quantity axis, but they're not selling them because the price is too high, not along the demand curve. So basically from here to here, this is going to be your surplus right in there, or your overage. You have too much of a product. Right, part C, it's asking you, that's going to be on the graph, it's asking you to shade in the area that represents total producer surplus after the price floor. All right, so remember, producer surplus is going to be below price, above the supply curve. All right, but remember, with the price floor, it creates an inefficiency in the market, so there is going to be deadweight loss. So you don't want to shade in the deadweight loss area. That's our DWL right here, that little triangle. But this, all of that would be your producer surplus, below price, above supply. Taking the deadweight loss out. Question D. This has to do with elasticity. It's saying the demand for milk is 2 throughout the price range. So remember your coefficients for price elasticity of demand. If it's 1 or above, that means it's elastic. So if it's up at 2, it's fairly elastic, right? The higher that number gets, the more elastic the good is. And remember, elasticity just speaks to the sensitivity to price, right? So if you're purchasing this product and the price goes up, you're going to look to buy something else if it's very elastic, if it's sensitive to price. So in this particular case, because the coefficient is 2, we can reason that, all right, this is an elastic good, so total consumer spending would decrease, all right, because the good is elastic. And sensitive to price. The price change, right? Like your percent change quantity demanded is going to be greater than your percent change in the price. That's what makes it elastic. And then let's go down to E. We have a couple parts for this. We want to draw another graph, assuming the price floor in milk caused the equilibrium price of eggs, a related consumption good. It doesn't tell you whether it's a substitute or a complement. We have to figure that out on our own. But it does tell us that the price of the eggs increases. All right, so when the price of the milk increases, the price of the eggs increases. So I will draw an egg graph over here. So this one's for eggs. And we have price and quantity. price equilibrium, quantity equilibrium. All right, so with the increase in price for milk, it's saying that in the egg market you see an increase in price. So what kind of shift would we need to have for an increase in price to happen? You would need an increase in demand. So that's what it's going to lead to. It's going to lead to an increase in demand. So therefore, your price is going to increase and your quantity will increase. Right? So that shows the effect the price floor has on the egg market. The price floor in the milk market has on the egg market. Now the second part of this question, it says, what economic term describes the relationship between milk and eggs? Well, they're just looking for the term substitutes. Right? They are substitutes of each other. Because if the price of one goes up and the demand for the other increases, that means that they're substitutes. If the price of milk goes up, people would buy more eggs. There'd be a higher demand for eggs. All right, so you can go ahead and check your points, subscribe, like, peace.
Very good.